All right, welcome back, everybody. This is Instructor Phil Demetriadis. We're going to go over and talk about what we covered last class and expand into the wonderful world of perspective. Okay, so just a quick review. This way I have the samples up here. We talked about 3 different options for drawing organics, okay? And again, I just mentioned this. Part of this came from my wonderful instructor in 7th grade, Mr. Graber, who taught us how to draw jelly beans, okay? The thing is he didn't give this exact terminology, but what he was pretty much explaining to us was this, was you draw a jelly bean by imagining its shape and size, and then you come over and you wrap that jelly bean with a rubber band and you draw through the shape, okay? The other thing that we did in 7th grade is he taught us to draw melted pancakes, okay? Melted pancakes for when we came over like this, and we would draw like a melted piece of water or glue or milk, and then he would have us extrude upward like so. Then by extruding upward, okay, we were able then to give something thickness and dimension. And we now have a side and we have a top. And if I bring that line back down here, you can see I can draw through that shape. Okay, so that was huge. That was something that I learned. I was really fortunate to get that in 7th grade. Okay, so how I transitioned part of this over drawing is I started realizing there were certain things that I would draw with the center line first, where when I start to sketch, especially stretched out shapes like this, or like if I have a spaceship of some kind, I think about the cockpit and I think about drawing a line that comes up, a line that comes back over, and I think about the center line of the vehicle first. Then I could come back over and I could start imagining what the other lines are. I can split that line, I can come back, draw that line through the other side, I can put a pair of wings on a vehicle, I can come back over here, find the opposite side over here. I can put, oops, a little bit of slip there. I can come back, put this other side over here, and then I could start to figure out exactly how a vehicle would work, okay? But all this principle that was right here was based off of this. I started with that center line, okay? So that's the center line approach right there. The other one I did, this is really common when I work in environment design. Why? Because when I'm drawing my environments, I have a gridded plane down. Now that's something we haven't really talked about in this class, but if you have me for environment sketching, that's huge. One of the secrets we talk about is having the ability to draw and think about your environment as a series of grid planes, okay? And when I do that, that's when I start to use the second approach right here. So approach number 2 was drawing from the ground up. And what happened exactly when I did that is I would come over like this. I'm going to draw just a really base shape like that melted pancake, right? Let me draw another melted pancake over right here, okay? I should call this demo melted pancakes just to trip everybody out, right? So then from here, I have 2 options I could do when I draw from the ground up, right? One is I could raise vertical lines from there, and then I could continue that same line that's down there that I just drew, okay? And what I've done is I've created a 3-dimensional object. I can go up it with a line, I can go across it with a line, I can drop down to its backside, and I could come in here and I could cut that in half if I wanted to, okay? The other approach, which Mr. Graber sort of taught us, is when we would come in and we would round that stuff, okay? We would come in here and we would do this. We would say, okay, we'd say I'm going to round you, and then I'm going to round you, and then we would sort of come back, and then we would do the next number 3, which was we'd either place cross sections in there, or we would come back in and throw a line going over the top of it. So Marshall used to mention, when I was here at school, when I was 18, he used to talk about dropping a piece of yarn on something. And I always like that example. If you stand above an object and you drop a piece of yarn, that yarn would fall and it would land like this. Now a dot, dot, dot is going to go behind it, and then the yarn would come here, and then part of the yarn is going to drop down and land in the middle. So here's that middle line going across my object right there. So what if I dropped another piece of yarn, but I turned a little bit to the side? So then I drop the piece of yarn and it laps over my object like that and comes back down to this side. That other piece of yarn, the next one, comes over here, drops back down to this side. So now I could draw through my shape and I could start to really get an idea of what those cross sections are and what's happening in terms of my shape and my form with what I'm drawing. You see how that works? Okay. That's a huge benefit for me because I can start rotating and drawing things extremely quickly out of my brain by using these 3 examples here. Okay, so example 1 was center line of an object. 2 was drawing from the ground up, which I explained to you. I tend to do that when I have grids. Okay, and number 3 here was drawing the cross sections. And what happens, I gave you guys as an assignment, draw one page, draw one page of this, one page of that, one page of this, right? Just to get familiar with it. But when I'm drawing, I use all 3 together. That's common, okay? So here, let me take this off now. I'm going to come down here to another layer. Let me shrink this window a little bit. And let me show you what happens when we're working with, when we're working with perspective here. What is the importance of doing this stuff with perspective, okay? Number 1, I always want students to do this. Whenever you draw any form of an environment, you always have to have a frame. Rule number 1, because without that frame, you're subject to the whole entire image of the page, which is crazy, okay? Then you're drawing to the edge of the page, and then your stuff doesn't look right, okay? Number 2, and by the way, I'm now giving you steps that we use in the environment design class, right? So number 1 was the frame, right? So I'll put our steps here. 1 was frame. Step number 2, we place in the horizon line, okay? The horizon line is key because this is what dictates part of our world. This is the angle at which we're viewing our world, okay? You know what I should have done? Give me a second. Let me just erase this. Let me show you as an example here. And go across. I should have kept the frame separate so I could talk about drawing. When you guys get to your page on perspective with organics, what I would like you to do is I would like you to make 3 frames to understand the variations of what's happening with your organics in relationship to 3 placements of different horizon lines, okay? So let me put this on another layer here. So watch. If I have a horizon line right there, okay, and if I come over here and if I decide to move this guy, that's a low horizon line. So that means if I have an object standing above that horizon line, that would give me the example of a dog walking down a road, okay? When we walk around at about 5 or 6 feet tall, the majority of our world that we see is right here. We're standing and looking, and our horizon line tends to be in the middle, okay? Now, if you're a really tall guy and you're like 6'5" and you're on the NBA, okay, your horizon line might be up a little bit higher like this because you're really tall, and then you're looking down on top of everything. Does that make sense? Because if my horizon line is high like this, think of it like this. I basically have the distance from here to here is how much distance I can see on top of things. Does that make sense? So if I take that and if I move that, okay, and if I bring this and if I move it downward, a dog is so low, he's going to be a little bit above the horizon line. He sees on top of things right directly in front of him, but he's very tiny, right? We're walking, we're seeing on top of things like that. And then the third option would be having your horizon line up a little bit higher. This is going to change your point of view because if my horizon line is right here, and if I come over here, and if I were to draw an ellipse here, okay, an ellipse right here, if I draw a square off of 1 point perspective, okay, my ellipse is going to look something like that, probably about in there. As I get closer to my horizon line, my ellipse is going to start to flatten out. And then as I come down here, my ellipse is going to be a lot greater, and I'm going to have a lot more angle inside there, okay? So why is that important? Well, if we grab that grid again, if I select all and I go to the Move tool, it's important for me to understand that because when I get to doing cross sections, okay, if my horizon line is super low down to there, see, I'm going to have a really thin ellipse line, right? So my cross sections are going to be squashed because my horizon line is low, okay? That's some differences. So for our demo, what I'm going to do today is just, I like to be just sort of happy and safe in the middle. I'm going to just sketch most of this demo with the horizon line being down about, let's say about right there. And that would be fine for you guys. I just want you to see what happens because I know this isn't a perspective class. This is a basic drawing class, right? But in basic drawing, it is important for us to understand where that horizon line is because it is dictating our world. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do here is the step 3 then in my process is throwing down what? A dedicated grid of some kind, okay? I sort of have a step in the middle there too, like step 4, which is where I throw down a grid and then I'm going to wrap it over some other element. So what I'm going to do, watch, I'm going to pick a vanishing point right here in the middle, and I'm going to come down here freehand, And I'm just basically going to draw a grid in 1-point perspective for you. Okay? Hold on, my lines are getting a little crooked. I got to stand up here and do this by hand. There we go. Okay, so there's my base grid. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a hill on the side here because I want you guys to understand the difference of when we have hills and plains that arise. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to sketch the basics of my hill right here like this. Okay, and then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to erase some of the lines that were in there. And I'll show you why in a second. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to finish drawing my grid going to the other side here. So I'm going to sketch my grid to about there, sketch my grid to here, about there. Trying to keep some nice straight lines in there. Okay, now that I have that done, what I'm going to do, this is how my brain thinks. I wrap shape with rubber bands, right? I'm going to draw through part of my hill shape here, and I'm going to find the other side, like that. See that? I put that light line that's going across there. Once I get that line in here, now I see where this dotted line hits, and then that line wraps up and over. Do you see that? I can see where that line hits, comes up and over like that. So I'm basically drawing through my shape, and I'm wrapping part of this hill with a rubber band now. And then I'm going to come in, and I'm going to throw the cross sections going across here. So I'm going to come in here. Now I'm lucky I'm holding Shift, okay, on the keyboard, so I can get these nice, perfectly straight lines, okay? And there we go. Now I have a dedicated grid plane there, right? I'm going to do the same thing now coming back in the opposite direction on my hill. I'm going to come here. I'm going to start with like a line that comes down to the center. I'm going to put another line coming down over here, through another line coming in this way, okay? By doing that, what sort of happened is now I have a sense of what I call something that I learned back in the Maya days, right? That's your x-axis. That's your y-axis. This is your z-depth. I like the way that Maya thinks because now I have three-dimensionality happening inside my sketch here, okay? So as I start to develop my organics in here, I'm always thinking about these three things. I'm thinking about my x relationship, my y, and my z, right? Because sometimes I'll make a comment to students like, your z is off. And I'm not talking about like your dance move or something else. I'm referring to your z depth is not quite working. So now if I come in here and if I say that, I'm talking about the relationship. So if I go to draw a plant right here, let's say here I'm going to draw a leaf, okay? This is, remember I told you I tend to work from the ground up. So if I come over here, I always draw like a little circle or whatever. I know I'm going to have a leaf. Leaves and plants tend to grow from the center of a plant. So if I come over here and I draw a leaf coming out, and that leaf is going to curve, I can still see on top of that leaf, right? Why? That's right, because it's under the horizon line. Well, welcome. This is probably the #1 biggest mistake with organics when people start drawing organics in a world is they're not following the world of perspective. So I could come over here, draw the basis of my leaf. Now I need to draw through. This leaf is going to come here. I need to draw a little bit of a dotted line to where it connects to that other side. Okay. Another example that we need to think about, and I didn't give this to you, but if you want to put this into one of your drawings, I would allow it, is drawing ribbon. Okay. Drawing a ribbon. So if you take a line like this and you come over here, this is very similar to what Mr. Graber taught us, right? So if I come over here and I take this line and I wrap part of this line like this, okay. Now the important part that everybody skipped was understanding this part right here. Dot, 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 drawing through. That line is going to come to here, and then it's going to wrap to here, right? That's drawing through the shape to get that three-dimensionality feel on the other side. So if I'm here, all I'm really doing is my leaf right now, okay, is transitioning into a ribbon that's curved at another angle. That's it. What I find with drawing is that in all of drawing and art and design, the difference to me between good instruction and bad instruction from different instructors is that some instructors don't think about a simple step or two. And human beings are really capable people that if someone shows you 2 or 3 steps to put parts of the puzzle together, it starts to work. And let me give you a little metaphor on that, or a little analogy, right? Anyone in here ever put a puzzle together? Okay? So when you sit down as a kid and you put a puzzle together, you have all these different parts and you're like, put them together, and it's chaotic. You can't figure it out, right? So what's the first step that people do to figure out how to put a puzzle together?
Do the edge.
What is it?
Do the edge.
Wait, I'm pointing to Jacqueline because I know she wants to say it. What is it, Jacqueline?
Find the pieces that fit together or start
Well, you hit it. Exactly. You find two pieces that fit together, but you start with the edge, right? So you start putting all these edge pieces together, and next thing you know, your puzzle ends up looking like this, right? Well, guess what you've done? And percentage-wise, you've now accomplished like 30 or 40% of the puzzle. So then you take a look at your other pieces, and then you start working your way inward, right? You start saying to yourself, hey, what is that shape? Do I have a piece that matches that shape? And what's a piece here? And then what you start to do is then your brain starts to figure out what the picture is. When it figures out what the picture is, and you realize, oh, it's a horse on a field, then you start going to look at the other pieces, and your brain makes a great cognitive development. You know what your brain does? The brain starts to put the pieces of the puzzle together inside your noggin. Okay? And in your head, you then realize, wait, I have three pieces here that are the picture of the horse face. So if I put those together, so what you do is you end up with the frame is step one, right? Step two now is you start to put the horse together on a separate little puzzle because you see the similarities. Then you bring these over and you dump them in there. When that's done, you have the little fill-in shapes, and that's it. And that's sort of the same principle of what we're doing in drawing, right? Is that we're coming over here and we're starting with a basic shape here, and think of it like this, we're putting parts of the puzzle together. So we need to start to fill up our space, okay? So I started from the center here. So if I'm going to have another leaf that's going to come towards me, I'm going to draw a curved line coming up, right? Think of the ribbon that's going to curve down like that. I'm going to come in here, I'm going to draw thickness to this. I'm going to curve this line back up to here. I'm going to give it some thickness here. I'm going to end that, and I'm going to bring that leaf back here. And if you want to, a lot of times I come in and I also draw the center line of the leaf. Why? Because there are center lines on leaves, and it makes it a little bit easier to see the three-dimensionality of it, okay? So as I get in here, let me zoom in a little bit more. I realize I'm zoomed out a little bit on my sketches here, okay? So as I get in here and I start sketching some of this now, I realize I should probably go to another layer, okay? So now I could come in here, I could keep doing the rest of the leaves. I'm going to start here. I'm going to have a line that recedes back to the vanishing point. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to draw another leaf coming this way. So now it's just about overlapping shapes. I'm just drawing a series of shapes. I gave this thickness. I'm going to bring this in. I realize when I hit about here, there's thickness there. I'm going to bring that tip of the leaf down. I'm going to curve this leaf, bring it back here, and then I realize this is going to connect back a little bit more. But there I have another leaf. So now let's take it a step further. Let's just keep drawing these. Now I'm going to go to the world of danger. I'm going to draw a crooked line, okay? I'm going to come over here from the middle, and I'm going to draw this, and I'm going to bend it up. Oh my gosh, it's crooked, right? And then I'm going to wrap it down like that, okay? So I'm going to come in here. What do leaves and blades of grass tend to do? They tend to start thicker, and they get thinner as they go up. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to grab a thickness about there. I'm going to bring my line down. I'm going to make it a little bit thicker, and as I come up here, I'm going to thin part of my leaf. I get it to right about here. Now, here's something that I catch myself doing sometimes after I place a center line in there. That center line's wrapping, it's coming down here. So technically, my leaf ends about there, and then this line comes up and wraps back to here, but then I need the leaf to come to meet that center line, right? In the middle like that. Now I have another leaf, okay? So this is the same way my brain works in Maya is I just start mapping out a bunch of 10 pieces of a bush, and then I put them all together, and in Maya, I get to call this a grouping. So it's important that when you're drawing, you think about that. You're drawing a bunch of separate little items, which are like pieces of the puzzle, right? And then you're going to bring them all together into one little section. So if I come back in here, let's say I decide to have another leaf that's coming up this way and curves a little here, and I'm going to end it. I'm going to bring the back in there, boom. Put the other side to it. There it is. If I come back over here, I'm going to draw this one just right above the horizon line, which means I'm still going to be able to see on top of it, right? So as this comes over here, put that together, and voila, now I have another leaf. So look at what's happening. I'm already starting to develop a plant structure in my environment, right? I'm sketching freehand. I have an organic there. But where did I start here, folks, right? As a reminder, I started down here. I worked from this. I worked from the ground up. Okay, next, let's say one thing that I always tell students about an environment design class, and you guys can do this in your homework if you like, right, is don't just, when you have a plant, it's boring when it's just a plant alone. Why? Because we get back to this premise in design, which is a 90-degree angle. Anytime you have a 90-degree angle, the human brain is bored. It looks at it and it goes, I see 90-degree angles all day long. I don't want to see any more 90-degree angles. So what we have to do is we have to counter break a 90-degree angle. So if I come in here, I'm going to break this. What am I going to do? Phil's going to throw a rock in here. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to sketch down on the ground where that rock would be, right? I'm drawing from the ground up. Then I'm going to come back here over to blue, okay? And then I'm going to come over and I'm going to throw a center line of where part of my rock would be. And then I'm going to come in and I'm going to wrap my rock with rubber bands. There it is. There's part of my rock here. And there's part of my rock right there. Okay? Now I'm going to throw another rock in. Now, eventually over time, I get a little bit faster, and I'm not drawing all those center lines or the cross contours. When I draw a rock, I tend to come over here and I do something like this. Now I'm thinking about contour line, and then I start thinking about angles in my rock, and maybe I have a hard, edge on my rock, and then it comes down, and then maybe I have my rock comes here, and there's a side part to it that's exposed like this, and I start putting little hard lines on here, but I'm thinking about how I can wrap part of these contour lines and give it that rock formation. And don't even get me started, there's all types of rocks. Okay, a great exercise to do in your sketchbook is go out and draw different types of rocks. There are rocks that look like this that are jagged edge, that are broken into like little pieces, like so. And they're like flat on one side because they've been broke. So when I'm drawing and I'm doing an environment and putting something together, I'm already thinking about this stuff. I'm thinking about the shape that exists, and I see that how there's another rock against another rock. Now, not that I'm a rock aficionado, which I'm not, but I do pay attention to little bits of detail. I'm out riding in the desert on my dirt bike, and I stop, and I check on my kids, and they're coming behind me, right? I stop, and I look, and there's a bunch of rocks by me. Well, guess what happens when there's a bunch of rocks? Nature. And nature composes things. Rain breaks them down. Things get hit. Earthquakes happen. Rocks fall down and break into other pieces. So whenever I notice there's a big rock, there tends to be a series of other little rocks right in here, right next to it. And then from there tend to be a couple other tiny little rocks around it. See what happens? Now, what starts to happen is all of a sudden I get inside my image a series of rocks that come together. Okay, I get what I call right here, I'm going to outline this in red for you. Okay, I get two things in drawing and design. Sort of go over this as quick as I can. So remember when I talked about that puzzle a couple minutes ago? I talked about creating a grouping, right? Guess what I have now? I have a grouping of organic shapes together that become a visual read. That visual read communicates something to the viewer. Okay? You look at that, and if I were to say, yeah, there's it's over there by the car, that's not a car because it doesn't have the visual read of a car. Okay? But if I were to say, hey, it's over there by the rock and the fallen tree, depending on how I draw the texture on this rock, I can make that look like a tree because it's changing the texture. Does that make sense? Okay, so this now becomes a grouping. So back over here to my drawing, okay, where I was drawing from the ground up, is that as I continue to draw and work on my organics, I am thinking about all of these sort of organic lines and shapes overlapping other shapes. Okay, so do you see how that starts to come together? It starts to work for me. Okay, now let's come over to this side of my piece here. I want to put a tree in there. I don't know what type of tree. I'm just going to make a tree up from my imagination. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to draw a base ground plane. Okay, a line that, see that little circle? It's really hard to see. I drew it very lightly there. But I'm going to take that and then I'm going to go upward from that. Remember, on grids, I said I always tend to start from the ground plane. I'm going to come up here and then I'm going to start to draw a tree that's coming up. So here I'm just drawing. Now, what are some principles of a tree that I know? A lot of trees do what? They start from a base and they taper up. Why? Why do they, when they get down, why do they get wider? So the word, in case you don't know, the word taper means to go from here and it either tapers inward, or when you get a haircut, like when I go to the barber, here's my ear, I tell them to taper my hair, which is going in this direction. It goes short on the sides. They also call that a business cut, by the way. Short on the sides, and then it tapers up to where there's more hair here. Does that make sense? That's what a taper is. So the majority of trees tend to taper a little bit because the base is wider to hold them up. It has a design from nature to support itself, to get it through its base ecosystem, right? So if I come over here and I start to draw a tree, okay, I can come back here now and I have two options to do. One is I need to identify and have a rough idea of where the canopy is going to be. Trees have all different sizes of canopies, okay? And most trees, what I mentioned to you earlier, a little side note, I'm going to drop for a couple students here. It's something that I learned from going out and sketching, is that most trees do this. When you are in your sketchbook, it's so funny because I talk to students who are like, I don't know what to draw. I can't figure out. I said, go draw trees. I don't want to draw trees. That's just boring. And that's where I always come back to the old proverb or description. It's not sketching that's boring. It's not the tree that's boring. It's you that is boring. You can't think of something cool to do. Okay, so what I was talking about earlier is that if you look at a lot of trees, okay, you will notice that the relationship to their canopy matches the relationship to the root structure, because it's based off of what? It's based off of light. When light comes down in, and if you have a canopy of part of a tree that extends its way out pretty far, you will notice that the roots tend to extend down and match up to the end of the upper canopy. Okay, oops, brush was too large, the eraser was large there. So basically, that's something I noticed from going out and sketching a lot in my sketchbook, is that if I come over here and look at this, I'm going to have tree structures that go out and match that distance from there to there. So what does that mean for me? When I'm in here and I start to sketch my tree, I want to think about the canopy structure. By the way, I had one student came back once and he said, I was looking at a cypress tree, and a cypress tree does that, but the root structures go, okay, yes. There are certain examples in nature where it's going to be a little bit different. That's fine, okay? But for the most part, if you go out and look at some of the trees that I've noticed, I go to some of the parks. We have the arboretum that's by here that's great to draw, right? Great, beautiful looking trees. We have some old oak trees in Orange County in California that have been around. Another great place to draw, Irvine Park. They have little places you can walk through. Another really cool place to draw that has some about 40 to 60-year-old pine trees is, you guys know where Yorba Regional Park is? Yorba Regional Park off of Orangethorpe. It's on the side to the 91 freeway, and along that whole side there's a jogging path, and they have a bunch of old pine trees. A lot of them are old and curvy. They've been blowing in the wind a little bit. They have a lot of character, and it's very peaceful. Just birds and squirrels running around. You go sit there in a chair with your sketchbook and just draw trees all day long. Okay. So as I come over here, I'm going to erase our little tree here. I understand when I'm looking at this tree that the canopies are matching up to that upper area right there. Okay, that's just something that I picked up. So let me erase that real quick. Why is that important? Well, as I come up and start to sketch part of my tree now, what Phil does is I like to come in here really quickly and I just throw down some type of a weird, goofy looking canopy structure. Okay, but in perspective, I have to understand the relationship of my canopy into my z-depth, right? Because what I can't tell right now, and this is the illusion of drawing, is that I brought this canopy out this way. You see that? Okay? That line that's right there, I don't know if I brought that canopy out going towards the vanishing point. If I did, that would mean this. That would mean that my canopy is ending about right there, and my tree is huge in length, right? Which wouldn't probably look right, right? Or is my canopy directly above right there? Does that make sense? Well, that's called transferring scale and perspective. That's understanding when something is hanging above, you follow it down to a grid plane, you know where it's connecting. So those are two differences I have to understand. I'm imagining that it's hitting down about right here onto there, and then therefore this is about right here. So that's going to enable and convey to me what my basic root structure is going to be, all right? So as I come in here now and start to draw my root structure, Now, I should give a whole nother lecture on this, but give me a second while we're recording. I'm going to pull something up for you really fast here. And I want to get up Safari really quick. Let's go to Safari. And let's type in a human body cardiovascular, I can't type, image. Boom. All right, excellent here. Let's see, I think this is what we wanted here. All right, so what you're going to notice about how the human body works, you might notice it on some drawings more, okay? And this isn't just the human body, this is how nature works, okay? So, in the human body, we tend to have a center. In nature, we have a center. From that center is growth. From that growth grows into branching systems, okay? So we have a heart. We have a main aorta, a main pipeline that goes in there. That pipeline then branches off into branching systems, okay? And it goes down into the leg. That branches off into other branching systems. That branches off into more branching systems. And then you get a series of veins that came off of your main aorta, your main, what do you call your main blood supply? I'm not a doctor, right? But Thank you, your arteries. I'm zoning out, too busy lecturing. So you have your main artery, then you have a branching structure, right? So if we come back here and let's type in human body osteology, right, which is our bone structure. So human body osteology, and we take a look at this, and then we come over here, and now you're really going to start to notice this. You're going to start to notice a center. We have one bone that goes into two bones, that goes into a series of like 5 bones, that goes into a series of 5 bones that then have another 4 bones in them. It's a complete branching structure. So what does that mean? That means when we're looking at nature, let's try this. Let's try branching. Let's try this. Maple leaf. Let's grab a maple leaf and we look at a maple leaf. Wow, look at the similarities here with a maple leaf, folks. See the center? There's the dot. What happens? That's the artery that goes. What happens after the artery? It branches off. Then that branch goes into secondary branches. Then those go into third branches. So what do you understand right there to bring into a drawing point of view? Is that all of nature has a branching system. All of it does. I wish, Marshall Vandriff gave the most awesome lecture on this because he even looked at, let's type in real quick, if you have extra time, branching structure of nature. He went and looked at all these animals, and he was looking at snowflakes. He was looking at, when you look at a tree starts from the center, the branches grow up and they split off into secondary, into third, into fourth, and the more they start to branch, the thinner the branches get. Does that make sense? The same thing applies on the root structure down below. So why is that important? When you look at lung, you look at plants, you look at, that's a human lung right there. Okay? That's what our lungs look like. They go into these branching structures. That's why you should never smoke, because you end up with lung cancer like my mom and get half of your lung removed because you destroy part of those cells' ability to absorb oxygen and bring it into your blood system, right? And then you end up with horrible rheumatoid arthritis, which is a crippling disease, and it matches your knuckles up all because of the nicotine in your body. Not kidding, by the way. Okay, so what does that mean? As a designer, if I understand the functionality, and if I understand, when we start looking at cells, okay, we start looking at flowers, you look at a snowflake, all these things in nature are built off of branching systems, all right? So that's something you probably never learned in a basic drawing class, was understanding the importance of branching systems. Well, there is. So if I come down here, I'm going to start, I always think of the center of my tree. That way, I think of drawing branching systems that come out from that center of my tree. So if I come over here and I put a cross section in there, right? Now I'm going to do that other method. Remember before in the demo I did the last time on organics, I drew a line that sort of went down the surface and came down, right? And then look, then I'm going to throw a branch coming off of there. That's the first branch. So that means the second branch should be smaller, then separate again. So the second branch will be here and separate again. And maybe here I might have another one separate and another one, a third, like that, right? So I drew the line. In Maya, we have this really cool thing that we can do where we can put down a curve like this. What's it called, Mark? You remember? It's called extruding along a path. And we could take a curve like this, and then we could tell Maya basically this, that is the path. And then we can come back and we can say, I want you to extrude from the beginning of start A to start B. And then Maya will extrude this like this, and Maya will create a tube for us automatically. And we can do that. So that's sort of the next step here. That was the third step I showed you the other day, was doing, I call that doing the cross section, right? So now as I come in here and I put down that path line, now all I got to do is come in here and put the cross sections in. I'm going to start with the main one first and get smaller. Tree branches go up, they go down, boom, it comes to there. Now I'm going to come back in here and I'm going to find it's going to insert into the side here. So actually my branch is it's going to come back this way and then curve and then end a little bit. My branch, I meant to say my root. And now this root's going to be here. It's going to be a little smaller, right? Because it tapers off in the branching system. The more branches you get, the smaller they get. So I come over here, there, and now I have this guy going in the side there. And then I come over here, get that guy in the side, okay? Now I come back here. Now, one thing I love about trees is I love trees that grow and they get like twists and knots in them. I could draw a plain tree here, but I like to come over here, and this is something that actually helps me with trees. When you guys, a lot of you guys as students in here should be eventually inside a human anatomy class, right? When you take a look at part of the human anatomy, you will see that you have like biceps femoris that attaches down. I always screw up that freaking bone right there, but the bone. You know what bone that is, anyone?
The humerus.
The humerus, that's right. Just checking, I knew it was a humerus. I sort of zoned out. But anyway, humerus, right? Then what happens from that humerus is down below here, you have a tricep that comes, but if you look on the back side, the tricep is in tiers. It's in 3 tiers. One tier runs along this side, the other tier comes along here, and it attaches at different points, right? So then we get that. Then we have the deltoids. You have part of a deltoid that wraps over here, another part here, another part here. Does that make sense? Then you get down to part of the lower arm, and then you have the radius here, and you have the ulna, and then you have a supinator that wraps over like this. And here's, if you look at your supinator right here, see it's that muscle that goes right there and it wraps around. The reason why, I'm not trying to go into anatomy right now, okay, but look, your elbow, a bony landmark, sticks out right there, and your supinator is sort of wrapping around it like this, coming over, right? The reason why I'm doing this is when I got into human anatomy and started learning more about how, actually I drew that, I was drawing it in reverse there for a minute. This comes up, and then we have that tier right there, and then we get our one tier going this way, another tier going this way, and another, you have the deltoids splits into 3s like that, okay? Why is that important? Why am I talking about that right now? Because when I start to draw my trees, I've noticed trees do something very similar to that. They tend to have these little biceps that pop out, and they tend to have these little supinators that wrap around to create strength. So Mother Nature will take something like this. You see this base leg I did right here? Mother Nature will rotate that around the tree a little bit like this, and it'll put a little bit of a big, of like an arm that's coming through here, and I could wrap that with a little bit of line detail and a little bit of shape, right? And that tree starts to feel like it's an actual muscle, like nature is built. And to be honest, one of my belief systems, is that I believe when I look at this planet, I look at the similarities in all the different creatures, is I think there's a basic map. Because, by the way, when you start looking at nature, everything starts from a center that's a cell, and all of life is based off of a center. And gee, there just happens to be a similarity that our whole solar system is based off of a center with a series of planets that all rotate. All the planets are around, okay, all the cells are round, everything that exists, our whole, and you start going into the universe and it's round and everything comes back to the same philosophy. Well, I think that there's a pattern in nature where different things in nature get exposed and copied over again. So when I look at my trees, I start to think of my trees of having this sort of muscle formation I'm just wrapping a cone right now with a little bit of light detail to show what's happening to part of that tree. That way, when the human eye looks at this, so I've been drawing this tree for a couple minutes here, right? Let me speed it up for a minute here. Let's say I have another little branch that comes here and then zigzags off the other way, let's say. Okay, so now as I start to develop my tree, do you see how it feels like a realistic tree? Am I looking at tree reference right now? No. That's because I go out and sit and draw trees and listen to music, right? And so as I get up here and I know where my canopy is now I can do this. If this canopy drops to the side, what if I get dangerous and I go, hey, what if I have another canopy that's in front of it? And then I put a top to that one. What if this canopy goes up here and that canopy comes up to about here, let's say, like that, okay? So now I can start looking at this, and again, that was my center down there I started from, right? If I come up here to my tree, and there's the center, and if I dissect the center of my tree right there in perspective, I might have something that looks like that. So I'm going from the center, right? Now from the center, I'm going to come out and I'm going to think about a branching structure again. So I'm going to have a large branch that comes into the side here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to throw one in here to foreshorten, and I might throw another one back in over here. Okay. Trees also make knots. They get very knotty. Not knotty like bad behavior, but they get this sort of round knot thing going on. And inside that knot, if you've ever had a wood shop class, okay, what's the hardest thing to cut on a piece of wood? It's the hardened knot. It's like super hard. You can't cut through it with a saw. It'll bind up a saw, okay? So as I come down here and I get to part of this tree branch that's coming off, I tend to think of it as an arm again. Trees come out, they hit like a little elbow, a bony landmark, right? That branch then goes out, and it tends, sometimes, this is something that's been pretty fascinating to me. I want to do a little bit more studying on this when I'm out sketching. I've noticed that when the trees start to branch off into a branching structure, that the secondary branch that comes after that little elbow gets thinner and tends to be a little bit longer. So this little area in here that starts to get a little knotted up, that starts to become this like support arm. You see how that almost looks like an elbow right there? And then sometimes I cheat a little bit and I throw like a bicep on the tree like that. See that? It's like a little bump there and it looks like a bicep, but it's not a bicep. It's just field drawn and organic. Look, I even come in this little curved part you have here in your arm. I'll go like this and I put this little notch in there. So it sort of looks like it's notching through, and then I sort of get part of my shape in here, and then I come in here and go, okay, this is then going to, maybe that branches off this way, and then that's going to get thinner. It's going to split again. All right, this might, and by the way, sometimes, I mean, nature does all kinds of different things, but I've noticed that they don't tend to be matching exactly. They tend to be off a little bit. So if one branch is here, the next one tends to be over a little bit. So anyway, I'm going to try to finish this up because I know we're getting into the 40-minute plus area, and I want you guys to start to work. So this is what I do when I incorporate and start drawing and getting into organics, okay? So I start taking these branching systems. I wrap my shapes with rubber bands, which are cross sections. I'm thinking about their dimensionality. And by doing this, then here comes the fun part where you get to accentuate something, where you come in here and you're like, well, yes, there was a wind, and there was some vine and some old leaves that are hanging off the edge here, and this part wraps down. Artists love to do this when they do environments and drawings. They love to add stupid little things that don't really make any sense, but they're just fun to put on there. So I add like a vine now is wrapping around part of that, and the vine comes up here and it wraps over, and then maybe the vine splits in two, and part of that vine wraps up here, and that comes down here and goes to there. So you start adding these little details, and it starts to feel very realistic, because we see nature like that. Nature has moss that grows on things, and we see little vines or broken limbs or branches all over. Okay, now we come down to this, tree canopy. Well, tree canopy is just, it's simple. You need to look at what part of the canopy system is. One of the things I like to do that my friend Michael Spooner sort of taught me was he does this thing where he comes along part of the canopy and he just puts like these little nudges for like leaves. And then sometimes he breaks them like that. And he continues them through and he gets to the outside. And you get like this little nudge in here like this. And then this is the back side, so they get a little smaller, a little bit thinner. and you get what we call like a broken line. See, I didn't completely attach that line, so I get lost and found edges. So I might come up here, and then when I get up to the upper canopy now, if I bring this down, I do the same thing. So remember I had this canopy here, I have that canopy there, okay? So now I come over here, let's do some of that. I'm imagining lights coming from one side. The reason why that's important to me is I might break down my contour line on the left side since light's coming from this way, and then have more thicker contour line like on the right side. So here, I'm just going to come in here, create these little sort of broken edges in here, like so. And then I put a couple little interior lines to show that, like, hey, that's a shape right there. You know, there's a little bit of detail or shape over here. I'm going to draw through this, maybe another branch system that comes over here, goes up this way, a part of this tree, a part of over here, okay? And then I'm going to come back, I have part of this upper, and again, that gets covered by canopy, like right in here, like so, okay? Let me finish a little bit more canopy in there, so I have part of that canopy. Here, let me put another branch structure that goes this way, comes back down into here. Sorry, I'm just whipping through this really quick, okay? There. So the reason why I do that and treat my trees like this is now, let me erase this stuff. Hold on, what layer is that on? There we go. Now as I get up here to the upper part of my tree, you know, I can push the canopy even more and make the tree a lot heavier. Okay, see that? And it starts to feel like a tree. And here's the golden thing for me that makes a lot of sense when I'm working in terms of lighting is now I have an understanding that if light's coming down this way, here's where it makes a lot of sense, is that this is in shadow, right? Why is it in shadow? Because there's a canopy above it. See that? And then the shadow wraps over that form right there. Okay? Now I didn't finish the underside of the canopy right back here. I need to go back and do that right in here. Okay? So as I come back and finish part of my tree here, I might say, oh yeah, I had canopy that came here. Maybe that comes out a little bit more. Wraps down about here. Look, I had that branch that came out here. So look, just cut a circle in half. Take a sphere, throw another. Trees branch out into little bubble shapes all the time. And so I come over and look at that, and I just I wrap that outside line with a little bit of detail. I wrap the inside line. Okay, sometimes there's another little section that comes off on its own. Maybe a little branch holds another little section like that. Okay, so then I go back and I airbrush that. I'm just going to put a little bit of value under there so you can see it. Okay, so do you see how that feels like a tree now? Okay, so if I go back and draw what I just did there for you, let's go back and turn our grid back on. And excuse me for a second. I want to erase all this stuff I was talking about up here for a minute because it's underneath the drawing. There we go. Okay. So now as I go back into here, does that feel like a realistic tree? Right? And I'm not looking at reference. If I want to be very specific, I can look at little subtleties. I can look at the way, like for example, on a palm tree. Have you guys ever seen a foxtail palm tree? Okay. Well, a foxtail palm tree so there are a couple different types of palm trees that I already know that I've seen, and I actually know them because I've had to model them on productions before. Okay, so let's type in one's called a Mexican style palm tree. A Mexican style palm tree tends to have these spiky points on it. See that? They come to spikes. Okay? And that's actually what it's called. It's, Mexican fan palm. Okay? So another type of palm tree, look at a queen palm tree. Okay? So if I look at a queen, they're not as pointy, and then they do this thing where they bend off to the side. Okay, do you see that? So then there's a king. So if I look at a king palm tree, okay, a king has these much thicker points on it. Okay, and even part of the stem is a little bit thicker. And then let's type in fox. In fox, they're pretty cool. You look like you're on this desert island or something. They're very fluffy. See that? So those are 4 different variations of trees. I treat every one of these as a shape, and then I would put the detail that's in there. Okay? So I'm just drawing, a fill version out of my head right here, okay, which is fine. So the next in my organics, what is next for me? Well, it's all pretty much, if I take off this, there's my grid. Okay, hold on a minute. Let me move this downward here. Look at that, that's on one layer, right? So part two to part of it, now this is an environment class, that's a different story, right? But if you guys want to just keep doing this, this is how we work in perspective, is that you guys are going to have this grid plane, come over here and draw another organic, okay? So what's another organic that might be nature-based that you can draw? Let's say you wanted to do a fallen tree. Or let's say, actually, let's do a fallen tree and we'll do a couple big bushes. So if I'm going to do a couple big bushes, okay, I'm going to add another layer here. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to imagine maybe the bushes are behind this right here like this. So I see where they're landing. I'm going to draw their shape. I'm going to put a little bit of contour line on it. And then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to give the exterior bush shape that's there. Now, once I get part of that exterior down, and I've always noticed a little secret I do sometimes, bushes always have like rocks or a couple of things under them that help anchor them to the ground, right? So then bushes always have little patterns. Bushes have little flowers around them sometimes. They have little circles from like little teeny flower parts that grow out. They have little shrubbery indications like this, okay? There, so that's sort of like one bush. Then I might come over here and be like, well, bushes vary in styles. You might have another bush that's sort of off to the side here. Then I come back and I'm like, oh, cool, let's put a rock in our piece. So I put a big angular rock in here that has lots of angles. And I make sure you can see some of these angles in here. They're receding back, okay? And then maybe where that rock's off, maybe there's another rock that comes here and there's another little piece over here, another one over here. Maybe there's another rock pointing back in this direction, let's say. These are all organics, folks, right? And I have that that's in there, okay? There, so now I come back in here and then I decide, you know, maybe behind here. What I like about bushes is they're really as simple as just going and putting a couple little round things and then you sort of throw a little bit of a line over on top of them like that and it just helps you see the form. So now I have bushes that are in there, right? And now we talked about the fallen tree. So what shape is a fallen tree in, right? It's a cylinder. So I'm just going to come down here. I draw like the baseline. I'm going to draw part of my tree shape that's in here. Okay. Start with that. Now I'm going to imagine that it's been fallen down for a little bit. Maybe animals have came and raccoons have been eating it in the middle and it's starting to deteriorate and it had whatever. So I'm going to draw like when I come look at this end here, maybe I take part of this end, bring it out a little bit, and I'm going to bring part of that and overlap that other shape like so. So I know I'm going to have an edge to it, okay, a little bit of thickness that comes in here. And then I have this side that might come over, it might drop down as well and sort of blend in there somehow. And then I'm going to throw some contour line in there to match the inside of that, okay? Then the rest of it would just be like little detail. Maybe there was part of like a knot from an old branch there that fell off. I'm going to have some contour line that wraps over part of the outside. There might be sort of like a muscle structure to that tree. Part of the tree might be here broken down as well. And there might be another element over here. Okay, so I'm going back to basic shapes and tubes, and I'm wrapping this, and I know I'm starting to cross the line into that texturing thing that we're going to get to next week, right? But I'm just drawing this because I want to show you if I come back here, and if I put that back up there, do you see how I have an organic world now? Okay, so the thing about what we're doing right now is that we have simple shapes that exist inside perspective, and you guys need to draw those shapes correctly. You know, when we talked about the 3 versions of how to do it, and that's it. You guys now have to take what I've showed you, and you have to apply it. And here's the golden thing. How do you get good at doing this? It's really simple. There's one answer. It's mileage. The more you draw, the more you're in your sketchbook, the more you look at other artists, the more you dedicate time to it. It's just like any other craft inside the arts, okay? I've said this to my students before, right? In the other areas of the arts and music, you have to go to practice. You have to play your instrument to be good at it, right? If you go to theater, you have to go to theater practice. You have to learn your lines. You have to learn the reaction and the counteraction with other actors to be good at theater, okay? In dance, you have to learn the steps, the techniques, and then you have to match up to the music to make it work. art in drawing is the only place where people think they're going to get better from osmosis. And they think it's going to happen overnight from having a certain sketchbook or having a certain pen. No, that's all BS. It's about sitting and drawing and practicing and being familiar with your environment and just sketching all the time, okay? So I drew a water buffalo for you on the board a couple minutes ago because I'm drawing water buffaloes at home and I'm looking at their shapes and trying to figure out how to stretch and squash and stretch and exaggerate them to put them into a stylized world. It's the same thing with what we're doing here in our organics, okay? All right, so I'm going to wrap this lecture up. Thanks, guys, for watching. And I had a couple people. I did have somebody who had requested an organic lecture a long time ago, and it was like 4 months ago, and I've been so busy. And my apology to you, I didn't get anything up for you, but here's something that'll help you guys out. So the next phase in this, if I was to promote you guys to be more environmentally conscious, this is where I would start thinking about foreground, midground, and background, and I would keep drawing other organics. The benefit I have in working digitally is I could come in here and do that. I still have a grid plane that exists, and I could take off my drawing, and then I could just turn it back on. And look at this. And here's also something that's pretty cool, is you see how I sketched this bush right here? I could select all. I could come over here. This is something I love doing in Photoshop, is look, I can move this stuff over here. Look, I can put it in the foreground. See that? Or I can put it back here. Or I can move it all the way to the other side and overlap it behind there. So what is that? I'm trying to give you a little hint, is that part of the secret of drawing later on at a more advanced level has to deal with a couple, actually in the principles of animation and the principles of composition, draftsmanship. One of the key principles is overlap. Understanding how to overlap shapes over other shapes creates depth. And it creates depth on the x-axis, the y, and the z. End of story. Okay? All right, guys. Thanks. Let me stop the recorder.